All right, so today we're going to talk about why you're overthinking your UI UX. I've been to so many designer UI UX talks in my lifetime, and I cannot believe how many times they preach these sort of foundations and rules and things that you can do to immediately fix your UI UX. And I honestly disagree, and I'll show you a lot of why I disagree with it with some real evidence, some cool startups, and we'll actually break down one of the local iLab companies as well. So, to start, there are very few known techniques that can accurately and consistently shape a good UI UX. There are very few, okay? There's tons of things you could say, like keep it simple, related to other things that people are used to. There's tons of sort of vague general tenets to design that I think we're all pretty aware of. But the fact of the matter is that this is all learned anecdotally. This is all learned as something empirically as part of some experiment, okay? So you have to think it through by doing it rather than just thinking about it, okay? So I'm going to go through some trends that we've seen with websites, okay? Feel free to agree, disagree, speak up if you have a comment, and if you have a comment, just wait a little bit because we got to get you a microphone, okay? So one of the first things we started noticing in design recently is that beauty often comes second. So when you think about UI, which is sort of focused on interface elements, and UX, which is on how a user gets from point A to point B, we are now having the tendency to focus entirely on the beauty. Okay, these color schemes look good. I love plain white. We should mimic what Pinterest looks like. We should mimic what Twitter looks like. And they have such a good UI, UX. When in fact, there are plenty of good examples of successful companies, successful websites that have terrible UI and UX by conventional wisdom. So one, we have here Reddit, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. I'll talk about that a little bit more soon. Craigslist is notorious for this, right? The UI has barely changed. Just recently, they changed the map a little bit, and they have like a gallery view. But it's pretty much the same. But it's still dominating all these other very famous and very highly funded startups trying to focus in subletting and borrowing goods and selling goods online. And then Amazon, which has only recently started to make some UI updates, but you can still see some elements of old Amazon in there, and it's, of course, the largest online retailer. So what do I mean by this? Is anyone familiar with Dig? Anyone remember Dig? Just a few of you, okay. So Dig was the Reddit before Reddit in short terms. Dig was sort of the original creator of this sort of news platform, and it was by far way, way, way more popular than Reddit, on the order of 10 times more popular than Reddit. Dig's interface was great. Reddit was coexisting at the time. People just preferred Dig. And then Dig did something that was really, really funny. They updated their UI all at once. It was called Dig 3.0. And then, about a week later, it was renamed the Dig Apocalypse. And what happened was the users were so upset about the new redesign and how elements have been changed and different processes that had all been changed at once that there was a massive, massive, massive exodus to Reddit. And that's the day or the week, literally the week that Reddit was born, from this huge momentum shift from Dig to Reddit. And so you notice this all the time right now. On Facebook, for example, anytime Facebook changes or the app changes, how many complaints do you see in your news feed saying, I hate the update, oh, the design looks so bad, the designers at Facebook don't know anything, right? And then 3 to 4 weeks later, everyone's okay with it again. So it's a known fact that for some reason users don't like change. So how can you start to stage the changes in a way that's beneficial for your company in terms of revenue, inbound marketing, more customers, customer acquisition, but not offend the users so much that they make a massive exodus to your competitor, right? Dig has now come back recently as a completely different platform, still has to do with curated news, but completely different UI, and they've had to reset. So huge success at first, 1 week turnaround to failure. eBay, awesome example. This is the original eBay website. And you can see this is pretty old website, so you can see elements of ugly gradients and weird stock images. But eBay was still a pretty big site back then. A lot of people had started to engage with it. Now eBay had this pale yellow color behind the text here, right? It was this strange yellow color, but they kept it there because it was part of their theme, their design. And then one day they changed it to white. Why? Well, in response to all the good feedback that Google was getting at the time, which is all this, let's do more white space. And eBay was like, let's clean up our image. Let's change it to white. what happened? eBay got thousands and thousands of reports, contacts, feedback reports saying, why did you take away the yellow? Why is the yellow gone? The yellow looks so good. Why did you do that? People were reporting all sorts of bugs through their bug reporting system. They were getting all this hate mail. At the time, people still wrote hate mail manually. They got all these problems. So what did eBay do? eBay wrote an algorithm that would gradually change the color from yellow to white over the span of 1 year. eBay made this conscious decision. They changed it back to yellow, and then gradually, every day, it gets a little bit lighter, and a little bit lighter, and a little bit lighter, and finally they move to white. So imagine going through that as the CTO of your company. You see all your users are upset, and you have to sort of reset and then fool them slowly rather than quickly. It's a pretty interesting story. Another big tenet you see all the time is make users feel smart, right? Don't hide it in complexity and design. You see this example often. On the left, which shaker do you think is the salt shaker?
The one with one.
The one with one or the one with three? How many of you think one? How many of you think three? It's split. How stupid would you feel if you put pepper where you needed to put salt and salt when you needed to put pepper, right? Cool design, not very useful. Turns out the one on the right is a lot easier to tell and users won't make any mistakes, right? Here's another tenet. What's that? I don't know. I've never found out. It's literally impossible. Here's another tenet, familiarity, right? So a lot of people, especially with mobile apps, are starting to align in their icons and their layouts and having this sidebar menu. And you see this trend occurring over and over again. The original Facebook app had this big landing page where it had 9 icons in a grid, and that was the home page, and you could go from there. And then they changed to this hamburger icon on the top left, and now you see this reoccurring all again and again in the app. And the reason why people find this useful, and this is one of the tenets that I seem to agree with, but don't think is as rock solid as people say it is because it saves people from feeling like they're stupid, right? It makes people feel smart, that they know immediately that this probably is going to activate the sidebar, right? So it's a really easy way to implement something that people are familiar with. But it's not always the best way. And so people, time and time again, think that this is a slick UI element rather than a useful UI element, and use it as their main source of navigation when it may not be appropriate. So, there are 4 steps, in my opinion, to building an amazing UI UX experience. 1 is narrowing it down. 2nd is building it. 3rd is testing it. And 4 is simplifying it, okay? So let's talk about narrowing the scope. This is one of the biggest things we used to do at Techstars, is narrowing the scope of what the founders were doing. Not just in their app or in their website, but in their pitch and what they say to investors and what they say to mentors and what they say to partners. Because what happens inevitably is people, time and time again, add all these words that really don't add anything to the description of their startup and make them sound like any old company. And it doesn't help anybody, and it doesn't help your users as well. So the way that we do this is we identify a very narrow band of target users, okay? Your first adopters. That doesn't mean first adopters is your target users. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this. We want to go for the market that's for young technology enthusiasts, 18 to 30, like 25, 28, who are like technology first adopters. That's our target market. That is not nearly enough. That is so vague. I cannot tell you how vague that is, okay? Second, the reason why narrowing your scope is important is because it speeds up your development time. It speeds up your development time significantly. And what do I mean by this? Well, when you narrow your scope and you find your target user, it's a lot easier for the developer and the designer to focus on only satisfying that one user's need, rather than this broad array of people, okay? And so when you really identify, like, an example of narrowing it down to a target user that really matters is moms between ages of 40 and 50, right, who live in California, right? That's a super narrow scope that allows a designer and a developer to really target what they need to be building. 3, it guides your testing. You know exactly who you're testing for, and that reveals a lot later. It gives marketing individuals early insight into acquisition strategies, okay? It's really, really important for you to identify what your market is, what your niche is. And there's so many competitors out there for every product. I've never seen a product where there isn't some tangentially related competitor. And you have to be able to distinguish yourself, and that often comes through in narrowing your scope. It narrows down the number of variables for testing, and it saves money because you're not going to be designing for everyone. You're designing for one specific group. Now, my hesitancy when I used to hear this advice was, but our product can be used for so many more people, right? It's so much bigger than that. It's so much better than that. And so I would always add this sort of comma sentence after my phrase. I would say, okay, it's for, let's go with the mom's example. It's for moms between ages 40 and 50 in California, or any other mom in the world that needs it, right? Which is like, okay, great, but why? Nobody cares, right? Everyone understands where this could go next, especially as an investor or a mentor. They understand where it will go next. That's their job to dream, and your job, that's coming too. But for now, which is often, it's sad that it's often not the focus for a lot of startups. For now, just pick one, okay? And you'll hear this advice over and over again too. Pick one and go with it. Pick one and go with it, okay? So we'll start with some good examples of this. Amazon. Does everyone know how Amazon got started? What they first started to sell? Books. Books. Amazon first started selling books. They were an online marketplace for books. Was it used books or new books? New. New books. Online marketplace for new books, no used books. Okay? It was pretty specific, and then it exploded into this huge online marketplace for everything. Okay? Google was only search. And now you can't really say Google without talking about Android, without talking about Gmail, right? They're 2 huge services now. And then Twitter started as an SMS platform. It was literally in an office place where people wanted to put announcements on a screen, and they wanted to SMS that. And that's where the character limit from Twitter comes from, because the character limit on the SMS is the exact same. And they found out, oh wow, maybe this could be used for other people, right? But they all built things to just solve this tiny little problem that seemed insignificant at the time or irrelevant. Google was number 12 in the search engine race, and they still dominated, right? So it's about killing it with that one thing and then moving on from there. So how do you do this? More concretely, besides grandiose statements, how do you actually do this? Here's a template we've used at Techstars before, and I find is pretty helpful. Blank is a blank that allows blank to blank. And I filled in your ad-libs here. Product is a general relatable tool. What do I mean by general relatable tool? A lot of people are hesitant to say what else they are like, right? What other company they are like. And the fact of the matter is that companies, people at TechCrunch, companies at Y Combinator, companies at Techstars, they all do this. They say, oh, we are the Uber for X, right? Because the Uber everyone is familiar with, they understand it, they get it, right? And although you're admitting that you're related to some other company, it makes it so much easier for a person to identify what you are and what you do, which is the huge problem, right? So who are you, like related? Even if you're not that closely related, just give somebody some foundation of where to go. Otherwise, they'll just drift, right? This is your first sentence. That allows blank, 2 adjectives plus target users. And I say 2 adjectives because I want you to get really specific, and your adjective can't be really, okay? I want really specific. I want actual numbers, age ranges, where they are, at least 2 adjectives, super specific as to who you're going to get. It should be so specific that you know exactly where to go to get them, right? If you're saying 18 to 30-year-olds who are first adopters of technology, where do you get those people? Kickstarter, like everyone else, right? If you say 18 to 30 academics who are pursuing a master's degree in the New England area, right? You can go to MIT, you can go to Harvard, you can do all these sorts of things, right? You know exactly where to get a fixed number of these people. That makes it a lot easier. And then last, to the use case, okay? What does it do, right? How many of you are familiar with Dropcam? Anyone familiar with Dropcam? So Dropcam is a cloud-based video monitoring service, okay? Their first target market was small businesses and people with families, okay? People with young children families. But they started with small businesses first, right? All those people who need to install CCTVs, and they want to put these things up in there, and they have to wire all this stuff back to a back room where there's some video recorder. Dropcam was cloud-based. So who wants to take a shot at, and Abby, if we could get the mic ready, who wants to take a shot at crafting this sentence for Dropcam?
I'll have to bear with me since I volunteered. Dropcam is a cloud-based recording tool that allows small business owners to keep their video in the cloud.
Yeah, good. So some of you haven't heard of Dropcam. The reason why they did it is for activity monitoring. They want to see who's coming in, who's coming out, when was it active. So that was awesome. That was awesome, right? Now, can we get more specific with target users and adjectives? Yes, we can. But you get the general idea of what this template does. It actually gets you to focus on 2 or 3 things that really identify your company, okay? The second step is defining personas. We've heard this a lot, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But something that's really useful for designers and for developers is taking those target users and actually putting a name to it, right? So saying that somebody, your target is moms 40 to 50 years old who live in California and are in this income bracket. Instead of that, say, I know the mom's name is Mary, okay? Mary is 43 years old. She has 2 kids, 1 daughter, 1 son. The daughter's age is X, the son's name is Y, and they live in Sacramento, okay? Their income is $150,000 a year. Okay, that is super specific, and I know it sounds crazy and it sounds silly, but you can design these personas that's one Mary, one Tanya, one Stephanie, that range your spectrum, and then when you're going through these design iterations, you can call them out. Would Mary be interested in this at all? Mary's a soccer mom, but Tanya's not a soccer mom. Tanya doesn't care, right? Tanya's a businesswoman. She's not home with her kids as often, right? So this is why defining personas people feel is really important. Don't get too carried away with it. A lot of people go and draft out so many details. It's just a placeholder. So when you're talking to people, you can immediately discount part of your audience, your target audience, and so you're making sure you're attributing the right things to them. Does that make sense? All right, then you can check yourself. You can make a storyboard. You can use your personas. You can identify dead ends. You can cut the trees and the branches. A lot of people use. This is actually from iOS. When you're designing an iOS app, they have a whole storyboarding tool. That's how you design your layouts on iPhone. And that's because it's really easy to think about it that way when you're developing for iOS and designing for iOS. So it's really cool. It's a built-in feature, so you can see exactly how many steps does it take to get from point A to point B. And you know that you want to minimize those steps. That's easy. Everyone knows that, right? Then what do? You stop. Just stop. That's enough thinking. The problem is people think way too much, and they go into all these details, diagramming, and more mock-ups, and now let's do more persona reviews, more persona reviews. I cannot tell you how many times this happens, and it slows so many people down. You need to build. You need to build. You need to build. You need to build. Speed is king. Iterations is king, okay? And I'll tell you some tools you can use to help. And then I'll go into why people overthink it. So building, HTML5, really, everyone knows what HTML5 is, right? It's a really easy way to build some mobile apps. Yes, it'll lag in some performance. Yes, it won't have all the features of a native mobile app. But most people know, most computer science people know how to make HTML apps, HTML5 apps with JavaScript backends. It's very easy to implement. You can use templates online, and you can have a working app on a phone very quickly and very, very cheaply. Another thing, 99 Designs for logo design. Don't spend so much time on your logo. Don't spend so much time on your name. Turns out none of that matters at all. Name is one of those things that can only ever hurt you in a situation when you already have a ton of users. So it's not really that big of a deal. Don't worry about that yet. Choose a name, stick with it. A lot of times you can choose a word that doesn't even exist and just go with it. Kinotopia. How many of you are familiar with Kinotopia? I love Kinotopia. Hopefully you guys will too. Kinotopia is this awesome package of templates and buttons that look like iOS and Android buttons and menus and icons that is all built in Keynote and PowerPoint. So you can actually take these elements. A lot of us are familiar with those Keynote and PowerPoint, and you can just drag them into a slideshow, And you can make each one of those buttons click interactive, right? So you can take that, spit it out as a PDF or as a PowerPoint, put it on the phone, and people can actually click through it like it's a real app, right? Balsamiq, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Balsamiq. Balsamic's another free tool you can use online to start drafting out and putting it out there and getting people to use it and test it. Distributing, there's TestFlight, there's Heroku, there's Hockey App, there's all sorts of ways to distribute it. Just get it out there. I know TestFlight can be a pain for iOS apps, but you just need to get people on board using it. And then lastly, and most importantly, is how do you collect the data? So it's great to see and do user studies and look at people as they're using an app. But what's more important is to crowd together all this data so that you can be very, very quantitative in how you evaluate your UI, UX. So one tool I love is Heap. Definitely check out Heap. It's a Y Combinator company. Their idea is to collect everything all at once. So with Google Analytics, you actually have to say, I want to track this button versus this button, and I want to see how many times people are going to stay on this site. You have to put trackers on each one of those things. Heap collects everything, and post facto, you can say, oh, I wonder how much this was used. So Heap, in my opinion, is brilliant because that's often how design iteration works. You have no idea what you want to track at the moment. You have some idea, but you want to see the other things that you will be suspicious of later. Okay? Flurry is used for mobile apps, and then MailChimp and HubSpot are great for email marketing, but analytics, data. This is going to be the biggest tool for you to figure out what you should do next. So I'll give you a real example of this. So this is an app I designed a few years ago. It's a bus tracking app. So all it does is you can find a stop near you, click it, and it'll tell you when the next bus is coming. And you can do things. There's all sorts of features like a map and find the stops nearby, and you can keep a list of favorites. And so I built some analytics into it just to see how it was being used. It's pretty interesting, right? This is used at a University of Virginia. And you can see the week-by-week cycles, right? You can see on Sunday, nobody likes to ride the bus. And you can see spring break here, here's summer, right? Here's school gets started, everyone's trying to get the app and use the bus again. Then you see another drop for fall break. You see all of that in the data. And you expect it, but it's really cool to actually see it. So this app had, at its peak, over 10,000 daily active users, and it had all sorts of features that I built into it. You could browse a list of favorites. You could browse recent stops that you had just clicked. You could browse a full alphabetical list if you couldn't find it using the other ways. So you could browse 10 stops nearby, and you could look at a Google map of all the markers placed on there. Right? All the things I would think would be great for a bus app to have. So how many of you think, let's just call out, I'm going to ask you which feature do you think was the most, which feature do you think was the most popular, and the second most popular, and the third most popular, okay? So how many of you think number one, or let's actually do this. Okay, let's do this. How many of you think number one was the most popular? Browse favorite stops. That's a favorites list. How many of you think number two is the most popular? Recents list, less. How many think browse full alphabetical list? No one. How many of you think browse the 10 stops nearby? And Google Map. Okay, here's the real data. Favorites list, recents list. The third most popular feature, by far most popular than nearby, map, or search nearby, using the search function, is browse a full alphabetical list of all the stops. That's 250 stops. Okay? No, you cannot predict this. This is what I mean. Okay, this is my first realization that I had no idea what I was talking about, and that users, for some reason, it's just a giant table in this app, and they have to scroll all the way down. It didn't even have the letters so that you could skip from. It was just one giant list, and it's the third most popular thing, right? Of course, favorites and recents, that I sort of expected, but browse, more popular than the map, that took way longer to implement? Yeah.
Can I interrupt the question?
Sure.
I can yell really loud. Oh. So when you get a feature that surprises you like this, that browse alphabetical list, does it tell you that the users are doing something different, or that your app is failing at a certain function, therefore they're bypassing it with some sort of bizarre workaround? I mean, what do you get from this data?
It could be either, right? It could be either. But either way, right? I had designed an app where this feature wasn't even one of the tabs. It's hidden, right? So I had done something dramatically wrong here. whatever it was, either people didn't want to use the nearby map features or they didn't work that well, and so this is the only thing that worked really well, right? And what I found was, I'll tell you what I found. So I found was this nearby click, it took too long for the GPS to lock on, and so people would just wait. And it would take 15 seconds almost. This is back in early Android days when it was not very good at all. Maps click, people just didn't really know where the stops were geographically. They kind of knew it was near this building, but they didn't know which one was the right one. Browse list click, I still don't quite know why it's more popular than search if they knew what the name they were looking for was. But for some reason, people like to see it in a list. And so what I did was I made browse click more prominent. I made these two the most prominent, favorites and recents, because I was sort of, it seemed that this difference was significantly higher than the other two. And then I took browse list and I made it its own tab, right? I said, okay, I'll give people easier access to it. It'll be there for them. They don't have to click a button and then open a list, right? But regardless, you can see the app again. It's not even in the promo graphic. I had no idea that this would be popular. So this is what I mean. This is the first example I saw in my career where I had completely failed to predict, and it was impossible to anticipate, right? And yes, there are these external factors, but I would have had no idea that this was happening, okay? All right, last step is to simplify, and I'll finish this part with a quote that you can read to yourselves. But we all know we need to simplify things. But the problem that people have is they simplify before they go and test, right? They anticipate by simplifying, and they really try and narrow down exactly what they want the user to use. Then they go to the user and they do something totally unexpected, and now it's too simple to figure out what they liked and what they didn't like, right? So oftentimes it's good to actually expose them to 4 or 5 things, even if you don't think they're probably not the right things that you want your users to use, and just see what they interact with. And then test, iterate, and following that data collection, looking at those graphs, then you simplify, right? Then you simplify. So oftentimes simplification happens at the wrong time. All right, now we're going to do something a little fun. So we have a startup here called Tiskit, co-founded with Frank here. And I'm going to do a quick UI UX walkthrough. However, you know that my policy with this is I don't know what the best UI UX is. All I know is how to test with users. So we're going to use you as our test users, okay? So I'm going to show you Tiskit's homepage. And Frank's been awesome here. He's totally willing to take the feedback. There's going to be dozens and dozens of people to give him some good feedback. So be nice, but be real. And I'll show you their main page before you've registered or signed up. Here's the main page. So what I want you to do is either in your head or on a piece of paper, just jot down what you think Tiskit does. Okay? What do you think the site's for? Just use some words or phrases, okay? Here you go. All right. Now I'm going to show you what happens when you log in. So now, make a new section. This is your updated list of words. Okay, and we have one last page. Make a new section. Okay, no more looking. Hiding them away. All right, so could we have somebody describe, and I'll write down some of the common phrases and themes here. Really quickly, actually, why don't we just do this? Why don't we yell it out? Is that what we said we would do?
Yeah, I can write it down.
Okay, sure. So why don't we yell out some words, and we're going to write it on the board so that we can see it in the video. But can somebody just say a phrase? What do you think this site does? What's it for? Yeah.
Get feedback on styles.
Get feedback on styles.
Looks like
Social
social shopping.
shopping.
Product reviews.
Product reviews. gift wish list.
Virtual shopping with your friends.
Virtual shopping with your friends.
Mood board for shopping.
What's that?
Mood board.
Mood boards for shopping. Anyone else? Giving Abby a hard time here.
Cloning Pinterest.
What's that?
Cloning Pinterest.
Cloning Pinterest.
What Pinterest?
Cloning Pinterest. Alex. Groups of people cloning Pinterest. Awesome. So we see some themes here, right? So we all sort of agree that it has something to do with shopping, style, fashion, right? That's a common theme. That's good. We're in the right market, right? Then there's some things that are surprising, right? There's gift wish list, there's mood board. We have some groups working on Pinterest, so maybe you add your own collections and you browse. That's interesting. Frank, is that interesting? So again, I knew what Tisket was before I browsed it, so I didn't want to go through and tear it apart before exposing it to all these new faces, which I think is even more valuable. Okay. So Frank, could you stand up real quick and give your background and what Tisket is?
Sure. So I'm Frank. Yeah. I'm Frank. That's Eric and Ozzy. We're co-founding Tisket. Tisket is a social commerce application that allows groups of friends to discuss potential clothing purchases in a private setting. The target customer that we have are women between the ages of 18 to 30, and we're solving the problem in which people, primarily women, who send links to each other when they discuss an important purchasing event like a bridesmaids dresses or a party that they have to go to kind of make that conversation go smoothly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frank. So what do you guys think? What are your immediate reactions? Here, Abby has the mic. Immediate reactions, anyone? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's super hard to say for me because I'm a guy, that's right. So I'm not going to shop, but it's like a great idea for women. I guess that's what they do a lot. Am I correct? No.
How do you see that? Do you think it aligned? Do you think it aligned well or didn't align well with people's initial assumptions?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, it highlights some features that website is gonna have, like gift wish list. I mean, it's kind of very close, right? Like social shopping.
Right.
So I think it's kind of close, yeah.
And how do you think, and maybe we can do a raise of hands for this one. How many of you did you fully assemble your opinion after the first image I showed you, just the registration page? How about the second one? And who needed the third one to fully understand what's going on? Okay. So you got a nice poll there, right? So although people design these landing pages and we have email registration and we want a short, nice phrase to describe it, the fact of the matter is that people understand things at different rates. They understand things when they're triggered by different images, and not until you really explain it do people get it, a lot of the time. And so, Frank, it's awesome data for you, right? So what's really interesting is that at Y Combinator, they have an in-house designer who's very famous for working on a variety of very famous startups. And he now has this sort of go-to template for how he designs websites or how he recommends to design templates. And you'll see this common theme when you look through Y Combinator companies on Hacker News. You'll see the name of the startup and immediately underneath it, exactly what problem it's solving. One sentence above the fold. It's exactly the problem it's solving. It's exactly what it is. You see this even with Dropcam. Dropcam, the first thing they have there is a mobile video monitoring, a mobile cloud-based video monitoring service, right? It's right there. That's the first thing you see. So when you put things onto your registration page that sound nice, right, that have nice words or sound sort of eloquent or there's a rhyme involved, you have to understand that this is the first thing they see. And for some people, they had to get 3 clicks in to figure out what was going on, right? And I'll tell you the average conversion between those clicks is going to drop more and more and more and more. You'll be left with close to maybe a 10th or a 50th of the people that first arrived at the registration page. So how do you capture them? How do you expose that data? And we asked Frank to give us a blurb for, I'll spare you the reading. We'll talk about the pathways. So now I tried to break it down, right? Me not being part of the target audience, how would I break this down and how would I talk to people? So I actually talked to my mom, who's done this a lot. She's sort of the go-to wedding coordinator in my family. And I asked her, what do you think this is for? What do you think you're going to use it for? And she said it was something similar to social shopping. She's like, okay, maybe this is where people post things they want to sell online. That was her reaction. And then I said, Mom, what do you think what are you supposed to do on this site? And the first thing she said was create a collection. And I wondered why, right? So let's look back at the website. And let's put it back on the screen, that would help. Create a collection. So I'm trying to figure out, I mean, this is only one sample size, but I'm trying to figure out why my mom said create collection is what you're supposed to do on this site. That's you just create collections. And it's because, well, maybe it's because the biggest button or element, the biggest thing on the site, the same size as actually all of the products, is create new collection, right? So that has just taken up, at least for my mother, the persona of what she thought would be part of this site. So then we tried to identify some more, and it basically came down to these three. So creating a collection, browsing a collection, and responding to a collection. Those can be narrowed down as sort of the three main activities that go on this site. And after talking with Frank, he confirmed that those are the three main things that happen here, right? So once you identify those pathways, another neat thing to do is to see what do you want, right? What do you as a startup want and what do users want out of this? So you as a company, what pathway do you need users to engage with most, right? What's this thing that's making you money? What's the thing that's going to make you money, right? Secondarily, what pathway do the users currently use most, right? So it's surprising if you go to websites like Reddit, they're just browsing and clicking links. Barely anyone is commenting. And it turns out that for Reddit, it's actually less important that they click the links. They don't make any money off of clicking links. It's more important that they stay on the main page browsing because that's where most of the ads are located. So there's conflicting incentives here, right? Users want one thing, the startup wants the other thing, so you have to find a good combination. And I don't have any good advice how to do that. It's too complicated for me to give you some general structure for how you combine those two things. But those are the two big input paths that people have. So of create, browse, and respond, and I guess I'll ask Frank here, of create, browse, and respond, what is the most important for your startup?
So we need content creators, so the create new collection is pretty important.
It's pretty important. So maybe that was reflected in that design at the beginning, right? A giant button to create. And what about for users? What do users currently interact with most?
The users are currently responding the most. Not
okay.
creating.
Right. So there's not enough creation, a lot of responding, but they need creation. Right? That reveals a lot. And a lot of people focus on what users want. But I have to tell you, you have to make money, right? So you have to start crafting it and forcing them, or at least trying to figure out how you can get them to your money-making strategies or adapting your money-making strategies, right? And then we simplify. So here's a screenshot again, right? The first thing I thought of was Pinterest when I saw it, right? And you see Pinterest has sort of a different goal in mind. Pinterest has actually taken a lot of what they need most, which is they need sharing, right? Pinterest is essentially, it's a social network, right? They need sharing, they need engagement. And that comes through in responses. So what they've done is they actually put the comment fields right there. You don't have to click through. They're putting that front and center, right? You see the products, you see who's engaged with it, and you can add a comment right there. Same with Facebook, right? You don't have to click a status and then go into the picture and then add it. You can now add a comment, and they even put your thumbnail there as if your comment's already there. Right? And you can just type it and enter it. It's that easy. So every business has its own incentives for things. So I took a look at this too, and I asked my mother again, what do you think? What do you think are the most important things? What does your eye go to? And she said again, create new collection is one in green right here, and she was looking immediately at the outfits. That was her first reaction. Look at the outfits, and then I asked her questions about, after showing this as a screen share, I took it away and I said, okay, how many people were using, or how many people had liked that outfit? Or any of the outfits, do you remember? Do you remember what the names were engaged with it? She didn't really remember, she actually remembered one name. And that's because we have a neighbor name with that same name. But she didn't remember the titles at all. It just didn't occur to her there was a title or the number of items in the collection. She just remembered that there's 4 items listed here. Right? So it's interesting. It's interesting to see what people pick up on the first 10 to 15 seconds of looking at the website. So I said, hey, maybe the title isn't important for users. Maybe that's great space that you can save there. Or maybe you want to put down the name of the user to somewhere else, right? But this is all data you can collect with analytics. You can see how people are engaging. Are they clicking to find out how many others are engaging with that collection? Are they clicking to see how many more items are in that collection, or are they not? And you realize which ones are actually important for the users. There's a lot of conflict with this on timestamps. Have you noticed that on iOS and Android, they started to hide timestamps a little bit on your text messages? Because they thought was that a lot of users don't really care about the timestamp. They just care generally like a few hours ago, maybe a day ago, or they want this big disparity, and they're trying to save space. Some users love timestamps still, so they've had to re-enable it. So in iOS, you can now slide a little bit to see your timestamps for each one of your messages if you really want to see that precision. But it's an interesting balance, right? Why would anyone need that precision? Well, some of us really need it, and others really don't. The other thing that's really important to look at is what's above the fold. And it turns out my mother, when we were doing the screen share, she didn't even scroll. She just looked at this page. And what I really like about this is that the components that you wanted to interface most with are actually above it. You might have cut off a little bit here, but you've made sure to put the other items to the left and the comments right here to the right. Now, is this all necessary? I don't know. That requires testing, right? And is there something that we can do with this button, the down arrow? That was one of my suspicions. Hey, she thinks there's only 4 things and there's actually more. Is there some sort of infinite scroll or a number actually there? I don't know.
By fold, you're saying where it cuts off.
Right. So when you look at the fold, there's actually a lot of guidelines on this online about what resolutions are the most common. And you can actually take your website and plug it into this algorithm or this server basically that pulls up that website in a bunch of different resolutions, and you can see where the fold is on all those websites. And so sometimes you just want to expose it. Users don't scroll. It's a big problem. And so a lot of these one-pager websites that you see now, which is it's like some beautiful background and some cool text and icons, and you scroll down and you scroll down and you scroll down, the engagement just gets worse and worse and worse because people just don't scroll for some reason. It just doesn't happen. So people are making these one-pager above the folds these days, and it turns out that's where you're going to get the most engagement. So is there something you could do by saving this title and scooting more of this up and maybe having something else down here? Maybe, right? But it remains to be seen. All I can tell you is from the numbers, conversion generally goes down when you scroll and when you click through a lot of things. And I think everyone sort of understands that. The more work you have to do, the lower conversion is going to be, right? So that's about all I have today. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for hearing me out. It's a little bit unconventional of a UX UI talk because I think a lot of people have sort of like the 12 tenets of good design and different things that you can do and the trends. And I don't like looking at it that way because I think it's unpredictable. I think there are great examples of this. You can see all the time, like Snapchat, where you're like, where did they come up with that color scheme? Why is that mascot relevant? Why does the app not work well? I don't understand anything. And it's the most popular photo sharing thing right now except for Facebook. We actually met with the founders of Snapchat, and they themselves are surprised, right? It's so hard to predict why people like these things. And so I don't think that you can define tenets. All you can do is notice trends and try align to them, but to be open to changing it. So I have a few shameless plugs. I work at the MIT Media Lab, as Abby said. I'm doing a lot of stuff focused in hardware, and primarily to help bring low-cost healthcare diagnostics to India, where there's so many brilliant engineers, so many brilliant people. I just went on a trip to Mumbai where we tried to bring an EKG as a wearable device that's reusable. So we're trying to drive down the cost, not because of the electrical components, which are $9 total, but by making it reusable and re-wearable. So I'm love to talk to anybody who's interested in electrical engineering. I'm also doing some gesture recognition stuff with capacitance, so signal processing, gesture recognition. Love to talk to people who have cool ideas or have worked on these sorts of things. And obviously my background was primarily in software and mobile apps, so happy to help you guys as well. So thank you very, very much.
Do you want to open up?
Sure, we'll do questions. Yeah.
I've got a mic, so.
Hello. Thank you, first of all, for
Yeah.
that you talked about. You mentioned the word conversion rate quite a bit. I was wondering if you can give a few tips as to how to keep up the conversion rate, especially in cases where the setup page is pretty extensive and required.
Okay, so the way I'll answer this question is with examples of successful companies that have dramatically brought up their conversion rates. First, I'll give the example of Uber, who has a very complicated setup process because you have to add a credit card in order to get a car. And that's a huge barrier, right? That's people who have to open your app, log in with Google or Facebook, and then they have to put in, take out their wallet, put in the number if they don't remember it, the CVC code, all this stuff to get it. But Uber has done such a good job about getting hundreds and hundreds of people on their platform. So how did they do that? Well, one is with promotion deals like $20 off your first ride and discounts on certain days, right? But secondly, they've actually designed algorithms to make that process easier. So when you go in Uber, if you've seen it, you take an image of your card. And it seems a little weird at first, but when you take it, it uses some, they've actually spent thousands and thousands of dollars to just make this algorithm work well, where it tries to pull out the numbers on your cards and the expiration date and autofill it for you. So you don't have to take that time to do that. Now it's completely unnecessary. We all can type in the number, but it just makes it faster, which skyrockets their conversion rate. The other thing that a lot of people care about with websites and mobile apps is getting people to use the app again. That's the biggest factor of what is your retention and how do you get people to come in and then convert to do other things. And so what a lot of people are doing, and I think one of the strongest examples of this is Quora. How many of you are familiar with Quora? Awesome. So Quora's question or answer platform where you can ask questions and other people can answer them. And what Quora's done a really good job of is finding out what questions that you would probably be really curious about. So I'm a very curious person. I click maybe 1 or 2 questions on Quora ever. But they know exactly what I like. I'm interested in space stuff, and I'm interested in anything with healthcare tech. And so when that sort of stuff and startup stuff, so whenever questions come up where somebody's saying, Paul Graham from Y Combinator, why did you do this? They put that in an email and they send it to me without the answer. And I go in that email and I open it. I'm like, I need to know this answer to this question. And I go there, and because I need to know this so bad, they've teased me so bad, I log in and I read the whole answer and then I comment on it. That just does a really good job. So what I'd say, to be more general without these examples, we all know to up conversion rates you want to lessen the amount of work, right? Lessen the amount of work to get people onto it. But even when you do have that limit, give them so much incentive or build up so much data for them already that the only thing they can do to get through this or to finish is to convert or register. So I'll give one last example of this. So a lot of apps now don't like putting this login with Facebook to start, right? Because a lot of people get scared of that. So what they do is they let you use the app entirely. So imagine, I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but imagine it was an accounting app where you could log your expenses, okay? And so what they want you to log and connect with Google so they can authenticate you and learn more about you and all that stuff. What they do instead is let you log all your expenses. You have to go in, put the amount, where it was from, what card you used. You do that and you're like, oh, it's tracking really well. And then it says, if you want to save this, you got to log in. Right? You have 5 things already in there. Fine, I'll do it, fine. The same thing happens with a service called Interfolio. Are you familiar with that? It's a recommendation letter service. So you get people to send recommendation letters through it, and then they route it to the colleges, and it's all handled electronically. They have this awesome thing where you can easily upload a recommendation letter, and it stays confidential, and all these schools approve of it. And then right before you send, it's like, oh, you should pay, by the way. And you've already told your professors and your advisors to submit to this platform. Now it's embarrassing. If you tell them to do it again through another thing, it's like, fine, I'll pay $30 to send it out to all these colleges. They leave the registration for only when it's really necessary, which is usually when you're buying or you're saving the data. So that's also worked a lot for people too. Yeah.
With Tiskit, we were talking about communicating what exactly it is your value proposition to your users. So a lot of sites, including Pinterest, they'll have a little sort of guided pop-ups,
Right.
Introducing this is for this, and you have a little got it button, and the next one opens up.
Right.
Is there any data on what percentage of users actually spend time reading on it, or any your views? I mean, it's a sort of, you don't want users to go and click extra stuff, but it's sort of safeguarding against the fact that users might be confused about, especially if it's a little complicated.
Right.
So for Tiskit, if you had something pointing to the
Add a
collection, this is a collection where you could post what you're looking to buy and have your friends comment on it or something like that.
Right.
That sort of clarifies it, right?
Right.
Any opinion on that?
So I think a big reason why people do that and design those pop-ups and those dialogues is to give a user a route, right? So we're talking about routes or pathways, right? Giving a user a pathway to follow, because sometimes when there's so many things on a page like Pinterest, you're not exactly sure that you go from here and then you go from here and then you go from here. And they've sort of exposed them to like the 3 different main things about Pinterest already. Now, you can tell me, right? For sometimes, in some apps, it's really annoying to go through a tutorial, and other apps do a really good job of making it quick to skip through. And other apps, you're so confused that you kind of like the tutorial and it walks you through nicely. Square is a good example of this. Have you ever used the Square app? Yeah? So Square has this awesome, just step-by-step, like it just delights you with every step. You're like, okay, now we'll set up your account, and just connect. And it's like, good job, and you go to the next one. But you're expecting that to go through. And then there's other ones where it covers up the whole thing, and there's this monkey character, and it's pointing out and saying, oh, this is this button, and this is this. So what I would say is the reason why people use it is to guide people down the path that they care about, right? So Pinterest, pin something, comment on it. In this one, add collections first, right? That's the first thing you would comment. But you want to keep those short, and you don't want to point out obvious things that people obviously understand. Does that make sense? Yeah. Not a very specific answer, but I think it should help. Yeah?
Did you change anything when you found out that the favorite stop is the most popular feature?
Yeah. So I put favorites and recents as the 2 first things you see in the app. And you can see, I think the older version of the app is still online now because I haven't taken it down. But that was my most recent update. It was bought, that version was bought by the transportation system that was using it. So I don't have it anymore. I have the old one up. And then I took that browse list and I also made that a tab as well because I found out that people really liked it. And I did other things like alphabetizing it and putting it in sections. But for some reason, some people are, my suspicion is that the reason why people use it is because they remember like one street that the bus stop is on, but they don't remember the full name of the bus stop. So like, oh, it starts with B because it's on, Bus Street or something. They go there and they find it. Or they know, relatively speaking, where the location of it is. It's like at the end of the list, so they just go there and it's easy. Those are my suspicions, but it's hard to tell. I just know that the engagement for favorites and recents went up significantly when I did that, and browse list actually stayed pretty steady, and nearby and maps started to go up a little bit higher. So that was my evidence. Yeah?
What's your take on adding a video to a homepage or the first screen a user comes to in terms of call to action or explaining what the app is intended to do?
So I love videos for hardware because obviously with hardware it's hard to feel it and use it. But I think honestly for software, when you use like a lot of startups use this like cartoon, which is like, this is Bob. Bob has problems with accounting, so Bob uses a lot of startups like that service. I think those are great in explaining things to investors or mentors or partners, right? It's like a very succinct way of showing it. But I think most users, unless the timestamp on that is less than like 30 seconds, are either going to play it and not listen to the whole thing or are not going to play it at all. I think with software, the best way to show them is to just bring them in and tell them, right? Not to just, there's no introduction page, it's just jump in. But with hardware where you can't actually use it and see it, it's really good to see the use cases like the Myo Band and Google Glass, right? You get some idea of like, oh, this is cool because Coin did a really good job with their video about making that credit card. But there are some examples of silly videos which took off too, so I'll give you the opposite side of this advice. Dollar Shave Club, have you heard of Dollar Shave Club? You've probably seen their video. They have a really funny video, okay? The guy's saying, well, you pay like $2 a month or $3 a month, something like that, and they ship you razors to your door. The video is hilarious. The service is, it's just shaving like razors delivery. But because of that, they got so much inbound marketing from people curious about Dollar Shave Club that it just stacked their user base. So they had so many pre-orders on their site from that. Now they're struggling with Harry's and all this other competition coming up. But hey, it worked for them, right? What else?
So maybe I can extend the bus question a little bit. How far do you adapt to users versus training users? So on one hand, users will tell you, I want an alphabetized bus list, and you build a whole new app based on an alphabetized bus list, which is ridiculous because you know that you actually want to train them to use this other service, which will then get you money.
Right.
So in the case of Frank's thing, I mean, your mom just wants to create or wants to respond to collections. She doesn't want to create collections at all. But Frank obviously has a vested interest in getting her to create collections. So if he adapts to her, he's basically lost that part of his website, which is important to him. But if he doesn't adapt to her,
Right.
there's also a trade-off. So where do you draw that balance between adapting and training a user?
So your
How do you decide?
Yeah, so your priority is always to make money. And again, with my generalizations about startups, there's so many startups that say, oh, I don't need to worry about making money. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Once I get people looking at it, it'll work. People say that all the time, and it's just not a good answer, honestly, to anyone and yourself. For me, the priority is to do that. Now, I'll give you an example, again, of a situation in which they wanted more engagement on one aspect, but got more engagement on the other. So Reddit is a really great example. So the founders were actually UVA alums. So I met them and I worked with them for a little bit when they were first getting started. And I left, and I'm kind of sad I left. But they had the way that they started Reddit is they actually seeded all the content themselves. All the links that you see that are now submitted by users who want some sort of upvote or karma fame was actually made by the founders initially. So what it looked like was that there were already thousands of people on this website, and all this data and links were submitted on their own. And because they found that users only wanted to upvote and downvote and comment, and like even that commenting was less. It was mostly upvote and downvote. But they got this cycle going where they submitted their own links to articles they thought were cool and artificially like moved them in this list of upvotes and downvotes to the point where people were like, oh, I want to be on the front page of Reddit. And they eventually started finding the audience that really liked to submit, which are the people who really wanted to be famous to themselves. So that's how it was. So so that's one way of doing it, right? Is to do it yourself and to see if you give it a little bit of a push, some momentum, it just starts to go. But again, you have to be focused on making money. And if you can adapt and make money, great. But if your business plan is sort of locked in place, then you have to find ways in which you can motivate people to do that. Yeah.
How do you like iOS 7 UI update versus previous versus Android? What about Android?
Yeah, so iOS 7 was a beast, right? It had a lot of people who loved it, a lot of people who hated it, and there's still people who like certain aspects and hate certain aspects. It's always going to happen. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate side effect. I think the reason why it was done was obviously because of the skeuomorphism push that was before that version of iOS, which was why are you designing things to look like they're real when you just want to get people to use the app properly and just make it flat and easy to read. And so they did it as a change, primarily as, in my opinion, as a response to Android and Windows, who had this flat UI for a while. What do I think of it? I think people are used to it already. I think they're okay with it now. I think initially they didn't like it, and there was a lot of uproar, just like users resist change. And I think they actually updated too much of it at once. It was just a whole different thing in one day, right? So it's like, the icon is different now. I don't even know where it is anymore. I think they could have done it in a staged way like Facebook does now, where a certain population of their users got it first and only some features, and they staged it. What's interesting about Android is you can actually do this on the market, where you can say, I only want to show this to 100 people, just choose 100 people randomly, and I want to see what their engagement is like. And then I'm going to change it, and then put it 500 people, and then 1,000. And you can do the staged rollout. So my response to that is, their designers are way better than me, right? They have a lot more experience, and they're trying to learn this themselves too. And the way that I think most companies are starting to do that is to do the staged rollout of things. So testing with the staged rollout. But I think users are always going to resist big changes like that. I mean, you saw the yellow eBay, right? It was such a small change. Anything else?
So along the lines of that question, I think there might be some benefit too if you know some people have seen it already, right? You've seen, and then you want to see it, as opposed to being upset when it comes in. You finally feel like you're part of the cool club. When Instagram did it, they let you have your website. I remember waiting for them to let me have the cover page. So I think there's that added benefit too, of testing it and seeing what people like, but also
Right.
making the other people jealous.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? There was Mailbox was really good at making other people jealous. They had this wait list of thousands and thousands of people, and you're like, oh, I want it. It looks so cool. And what they did was they actually used, are you familiar with Clout? Are you familiar with the service Clout? So Clout basically goes through your social, you all have a Clout profile right now, by the way. If you have a Twitter account, you have a Clout profile. If you go on Clout and you do clout.com/your Twitter name, you'll find what Clout calls your influence, or how many social networks you engage with. And using some different algorithms, they're able to say, this person is more important online than this other person. And so what Mailbox did is they found those really interesting first few people to have it as these influencers, right? These people who would, once they got it, they would be showing it to everyone, and it's a really big deal that they got it. And that sort of like jump-started this jealousy list of wait list thing going on there, where just everyone's, I want it because this person has it, and look, I'm part of it. Do you want an invite? I'll give you an invite. And so all these things happen. So it was sort of spurred, I think it was inspired somewhat by Gmail's invite system, which was done a while back, huge success. But yeah, I think jealousy, that's a good point. It's a good response. Anything else? Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to your example about your bus stop app.
Mm-hmm.
So you got that data, and it was admittedly not quite clear kind of why users were responding well to something and not to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And you made changes, and apparently there were some kind of, in your mind, kind of positive consequences to that,
Right.
more users or ease of use. Kind of, what would your response have been had it gone in the opposite direction? Right? Had you made changes and indeed kind of users responded in a way that was unanticipated, would you have just kind of gone back, or kind of, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is kind of how you iterate in response to data that
Another set of unexpected.
Right.
I see. Yeah, I would have gone back. That would have been my first reaction. I would have gone back to the original one and pieced it together with that new data. Now, what my approach would have actually been was to find, in that situation, which is totally unexpected, I think the numbers won't tell you everything. And you actually have to go and talk to them and ask people why do they choose to use nearby. It's hard to say, right? But I think whenever you see an unexpected result, you always want to take a step backwards rather than modifying that same thing further, because I think it'll reveal a lot more about what your users want. I think more concretely, probably a good approach for this is to look back at the original app and to look at the pathways and the conversions for each of those, and to figure out which step in that pathway started to decrease or increase unexpectedly compared to when you saw it again. And then looking only at that feature and asking a lot of people, right? So you assume everything else that's the same, you assume is going the same, but looking at that one deflection point and asking people specifically about that, or maybe like showing that first when you're showing people the app and seeing how they interact with it might change it. But yeah, generally I take a step back rather than modify forward. Not to say that's the best advice, but that's what I would do.
So you're building your application, you have the back end, you have the UI, UX to develop. So how you go with selecting which feature, I mean, like what's the trade-off between I'm gonna implement new features in the back end, or I'm gonna work more on the UX for those few features that I have already developed? And how you go with it? I mean, like how you say this feature I'm gonna implement it now or not, and how to decide which UX.
Right.
I mean, what's the best, what are the best practices in this way?
Sure. So there's, so the best advice for this is to parallelize, right? You don't want to have your back-end developers dependent on your front-end developers and vice versa. So you always want to be implementing continuously. Now, a good way to do that, and one that a lot of companies now use, is a service called Optimizely. Are you familiar with Optimizely? It's a Y Combinator company. I think it's 2010. They actually, it's for web apps, and they might have a mobile app solution. But they allow you to use multiple front ends, and they'll intelligently decide that, hey, for 5% of your visitors, or for visitors who have an account, they'll show this front end with this extra feature. And on this one, they won't show this front end with an extra feature. Or they'll show this completely different landing page for 80% of your users, right? So it's a really easy way to test these things in parallel where you can, and the nice thing about the back end is a lot of the back end doesn't have to show to the users. It can be implemented and pushed to staging and pushed to production, but it's not like most users won't, all the users won't see it immediately until the UI is implemented. And so what you can do is parallelize maybe with one designer, one UI UX guy to make that version of it and test it concurrently and evaluate if you need to build it out further. If you're familiar with lean startup strategies, a lot of people do this where they sort of fake a feature before building it. And they do things like, and the way that they do it is they say, okay, for example, say you wanted to offer a consulting service for buying some of this clothing, right? You could speak to a fashion expert, right? So this is a feature, that's a lot to build on the back end. So you want to see how many people even care about this. So you build the little button and it says, speak to an expert now, and you go through this process and you give them you ask for some currency from them, so something that's enough to show that they really want this. So you say like, okay, put in your name and exactly what you want to ask and what clothes you're thinking about. So it's enough work that a user really wants the service if they're putting this stuff in. And then you go to the end and you say, hold on, a user is coming available, and it just calls your phone and you pick it up. Hi, it's just you. And you just count how many people do that. Or you go to a dead end and you say, sorry, this service is unavailable. Or you say, sorry, this service is only available to premium customers coming soon. But you're just counting how many people go through that process and do it for you. And you take that conversion rate to evaluate what you should be doing on the back end. So a lot of people are using Kickstarter for this, unfortunately. But they have vaporware on Kickstarter. And they say, okay, well, if somebody's going to put money down for it and I get enough, I'm going to build it. I don't know if I can build it, but if I get X million or X thousand out of it, it's worth it. So they put together the front end while they're sort of experimenting still and then sort of validate on that side. So I don't know if that helps, that answers your question. Okay. Yeah. Let's wait for the mic.
About your bus app again, you didn't know what the users wanted, how the users were responding. So how about letting them respond to the app or letting them give feedbacks? That sometimes works, but sometimes it actually kills your conversion rate. So how do you go about it?
So do you mean in the app being able to report feedback, like write down what's wrong? Okay, so I'll tell you, so here's the problem with writing feedback. People only give feedback inherently for extreme opinions. So they really, really love it and it just saved them $100, or they really, really hate it and this feature needs to be in it. And so you don't get that middle range. You see that on Yelp, right? It's like either really good restaurant or really bad restaurant, or it's some Yelp elite person maybe in the middle. So that's what happens with feedback forms. However, a lot of the reason why people put feedback in is because it makes them feel better about something that didn't work. And so you see like Odesk, which is like a web service that you can just implement. It's like a chat protocol right there. And it's not that it's linked directly to the team. The team gets an email, but it looks like a chat thing. And they can respond live, but sometimes it takes some time. But it just gives, when something doesn't work, it gives them, when they have no other idea of where to go, it gives them something to like sort of let out their anger and frustration. And what it will reveal to you is those extreme bugs. So yes, it may be good for those extreme bugs, but I wouldn't necessarily put it front and center. So the way that Android does it is when something force closes, you can report. And so if you're really mad about it, you want to send your data up there and you want to type to Google like, this really sucks. Otherwise, you can just close the window. So you want to maybe give them the option, but don't put it front and center, I think.
And how about giving them some greed to do it, as in
What do you
put
mean?
in feedback and we'll give you discount coupons or something like that?
Oh, so so it depends on if it's going to, if that feedback or that failure point or that action directly impacts your bottom line. So again, more examples. So Fancy Hands, are you familiar with Fancy Hands? Anyone? So it's this virtual assistant service. It's awesome. I use it all the time. It's this, basically you can have a virtual assistant to manage your calendar and do menial tasks online, like book things and get a plane ticket, and it's a certain amount per month, like $20 a month for a certain number of tasks that they can do for you. And it's great. What I did recently was I was like, okay, I need to cut back on my monthly spending. This is one of those things that's like, I don't really need this. I could figure it out. So I go and I cancel it. I say, I cancel my account. I'm like, oh no, we're sorry you left. What went wrong? And you fill in this thing, and it doesn't let you fully close your account until you tell them what's wrong. And then when I sent it, regardless of what I put in that box, it was like, wait, we'll give you 15% off if you do this, if you sign up again, right? Right then and there. It's like, okay, fine, I'll get it again. So I ended up getting it again. But it was really cool to see like this, me leaving impacts their bottom line. And they didn't really care about the feedback, but it felt, I mean, because we work on this all the time, we know that there's no way they could have parsed through the text and figure out, okay, Rohan doesn't like it because of the price, or Rohan doesn't like it because of the service, right? But they're like, okay, well, here's what we can do to help now. And for them, 15% is nothing. That's well within their margin. But for the user, it's like, oh, I feel special. I feel better now. So I think if it impacts your bottom line, then yeah, it would be great to give them something. But don't give up if it's not really impacting. It's like a small feature, right? Anyone else? Awesome. Thank you guys so much.